corbels into some bookends today, and we're going to use this mold to do it. We're going to cast these from resin, and this is a two-part resin that I'm using here, and this actually needs a little bit of time to cure. You can kind of use any kind of resin that you want that is good for that, or you can actually use clay, but I'm going to use resin today, and I'm going to use this IOD mold, and these are the corbels that I have on hand, and I actually found these a while ago, and I was just trying to figure out a way to cover those holes so that way it would look, you know, like they're supposed to be bookends. So I'm actually looking at this and seeing that I have some curvature, but if you unmold these and they're already stiff, you can actually heat them with the heat gun. So usually read all the directions, make sure that you understand how to mix it. So it's just usually 2 equal parts, and then you pour it into a bigger container to mix it. Wear gloves and be in a ventilated area. Right here I'm next to a window, so I'm pretty good with that, but I'm just going to measure out 2 equal parts in these cups, and that makes it a little bit easier. And you don't want to do it by weight because one is actually heavier than the other. So I have the 2 cups there, and I'm just going to actually do some measuring in those and pour it into the bigger cup and stir that until it becomes clear again. It'll be kind of cloudy when you first start to mix those. So here you see that I have my mold. I have it on a piece of cardboard. It makes it easier to move it if you need to move it out of the way to clear your work surface. I have another piece of cardboard that I actually put on top, and this is actually so while it's curing that you don't get any kind of like lint or any kind of something landing on it or something like that. So and then it kind of gets stuck in there on your mold. So I'm going to pour these into the bigger cup, and then that way I can start actually mixing those together. So you want to make sure that you get everything out of the cup so you keep those equal parts. And the main thing is you want to make sure that when you're mixing this, that you're mixing it slow and steady, and that you're also scraping the sides down so that way you don't have any like little pockets that aren't mixed. You want to mix it slow and steady, not like crazy where you're pumping air into it, you know, and stuff. So you are going to get some small bubbles, but if you keep your stick down in there, you're not going to get any kind of extra bubbles that you don't need. Here I'm using my heat gun to pop some of those bubbles, and that way it's not such a big thing when I go to pour it. But after you pour it into your mold, these molds are really great because they can handle high heat. But if you use your heat gun, you know, and watch what you're doing and keep it moving, it should be okay with anything. You just want to make sure that you're not leaving it in one spot for a long time. So I pour the resin into my mold and just want to make sure that everything is pushed into the space, so that way you don't have any air pockets, and then when it cures you have, you know, a bunch of holes in your mold and stuff like that. So here I'm just pushing it into the corners and making sure that it is getting in there everywhere normally. And you want to make sure too that when you're pouring that you're keeping it your surfaces level, so that way you can see exactly what you're doing and that it is level. I use the heat gun to pop any bubbles there, and the great thing about the heat gun too is that it'll actually loosen up that resin, so it becomes like a little bit more liquidy, and so that way it's easier to kind of make sure it gets into all those little crevices and stuff like that. So I'm gonna finish pouring the resin that I have into some of the other molds. Excuse me. And then I'm gonna go from there. You know, when you get close to filling it to the top, you know, it's good to kind of just scoop it in there with the popsicle stick or whatever you have, because it just makes sure that you're not gonna like overflow it and stuff. So before I put the lid on or to cover it, I'm gonna pop the last bit of air bubbles that are coming to the top, and I'm going to make sure that everything's level and make sure that it all looks good and all the little pockets and little details are filled in. So I'm putting these two little cups on the side so that cardboard doesn't sit right on top and get into the resin. So I've let my resin cure, and I think this is the next day. Normally you don't have to wait that long, but you can wait till the next day. I caught this resin and got it out before it became completely stiff. The longer it sits, the stiffer that it will get, but you want to make sure that, you know, if you have any kind of little bends or curves in what you're putting it on, that you can kind of like bend that. If you get it and it's been sitting there a couple of days, you can always heat your castings with the heat gun, and it'll actually make those pliable again. So that's really great. So you don't have to worry about trying to catch it if you know you get tied up with other things. So here I'm just using the clear Gorilla Glue to glue those over the holes that are there, and making sure that I'm covering it. And sometimes I'm leveling these, because sometimes with the glue before it sets up it'll kind of move or whatever if it's sitting at a slant. So I want to make sure that I keep those level so that that way it doesn't slide off anywhere. This one, I'm just doing the same thing. I want to make sure that I'm gluing that and hitting the edges, and that I get that centered on there really well, and that I don't have any holes left there. This one has a little bit of a curve on there, so I'm just making sure that when I bent it, that, you know, I kind of, everything is fitting on there tight. And then I believe I set something heavy on there, and you can, I mean, it's a good idea to set something heavy on there so that that way you know, you get the best bond that you can get with that. So here my glue has had time to dry, and I'm actually getting ready to paint. I'm making sure that I don't have any you know, I guess pockets or that are open that didn't get covered, and that those molds didn't move, and everything looks good just before I start mixing up the paint to paint those. So I'm pretty satisfied with the way those are looking. I have paints here, and I'm showing you swatches, although it looks kind of washed out from the light, but I'm using DIY paint on there. And I like DIY because you can actually, it's really easy to distress, it's really easy to use, and the colors are really great. They dry lighter than what they normally are, but if you seal them, they get deeper in color. So this one here is the paint that I'm using. And I'm actually adding in some of this salt wash, I believe it's called, yeah, salt wash, and it's like a powdery, but it actually makes it kind of chunky, so you're going to get a lot of that texture in there. I'll make sure that I put the names of the colors that I used in the DIY paint. So normally they say you should add like equal parts paint to the salt wash, but I don't like it that thick. It gets pretty thick, and it kind of puffs up, like almost like it has like baking powder or something in it. But I don't want to put that much in there because I don't want to lose the detail that's actually in the corbel. So I want to make sure that I get a little bit of texture, but not enough to kind of like um, make all those great details go away. So I'm going to mix it, and then I'm actually going to let it sit for a minute or two. I'm using a container with a lid so that way when I'm done painting this, I can cover it and then use it the next day, or to paint, you know, other things that I have, so that it doesn't dry out. I think this is the old frosting container. So here I have my my bookend on, or oh my goodness, I have my corbel on a turning table, so that way it just makes it easier to paint, and I can kind of get it from all angles and look at it all the way through. So this paint is really good. It covered mostly in one coat. I did do a second coat just to kind of pile the color on there a little bit more, and to make sure that I got everything uh, covered well and hit all those little crevices and stuff like that, and to give it a little bit of texture in the areas that were kind of flat. So I'm just kind of pouncing. I'm not swiping the paint. I'm just pouncing it on there, so that way I'm making sure that I'm getting into all of those like little crevices. So here I am painting the next one, and the color that I choose is a green. I think the name of it is like Salty Kiss, and I'm doing the same thing where I'm adding the paint, and I'm adding the salt wash to it, and I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I think with this I put less salt wash in there only because I didn't use quite as much paint as I did with the first one. So that's why you won't see me using as much, and it's DIY paint still. So I'm gonna mix that up. I'm gonna let it sit for a minute or two, and then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to start painting the next one. And with the same thing as the first one, I actually painted and with the pouncing, not swiping, and I think I go back and do a second coat on this one. I think because the paint was darker, you can kind of see that light background a little bit more on there. So I did for sure go back and I did 2 coats on this one, just making sure. I know with these paints as well, if you're in a hurry, you can use your heat gun to kind of dry the paint faster, and that's what I did when I went back and did the second coat. I used my my heat gun to dry that paint, so that I can move my project along a little bit quicker. So I'm just getting into all those crevices, and again, just making sure everything's covered. So here what I'm doing is, since those are painted, they're dry, and now I'm going to wax to get some texture, not texture, but some depth in the paint, so that you could see all the little great details in there. And this is wax, which is also going to kind of seal that paint in as well, and get it so that it's a little bit protected. So I'm just pouring it into a little cup, making sure I have a rag so that way I can put the wax on and then go behind and take it off, you know, so that I can bring back some of that color from the base coat. You want to make sure that you're using that, it's really up to you what kind of, if you want it to be mostly white, then, you know, if you like that and you're not really interested in bringing back that base coat color, then you can leave it on there for a really long time. But I really wanted to bring back some of that color, so I didn't leave it on there as long, so that it wouldn't dry and it would be harder to get off. When you're taking the wax back off, you want to make sure that you're kind of pouncing it, you're not really wiping it, because that DIY paint, it will reactivate once it gets wet. So if you're not careful, you could actually end up wiping it off. So you see me, I'm just kind of pouncing my rag on there to get in the crevices and stuff like that. You don't really see me like wiping it too hard. I'm like, you know, having to just be kind of gentle with that, and making sure I get into those crevices and stuff. But I'm not, you can see I'm not being I'm not being like really particular about the way I'm just putting it on, because you want it to look antique and stuff. So I'm using my heat gun to dry some of that wax really quickly, because I want to actually put another darker wax on top of this. So the way that, you know, layer, 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 that's all it's about. It's about layering. The more layer you put on it, the more it's going to look old. So I used that dark wax that I showed you, but actually I poured some into a jar and put some water in it and mixed it with that, because I didn't want it to be as strong. I just kind of wanted like a wash of it. So you'll see when it goes on, it's super watery, and it's not really that dark. And the water there will give you a little bit more playtime in there and kind of allow you to move it around. Also, putting that white wax on there will also give you some leeway as well, so that that dark color, that dark wax, is not seeping into that paint and then making it so that you can't remove it. So the white wax actually acts as a barrier between the dark wax and the paint. So it gives you more control over it to remove it or add more or whatever. If you want it darker, you would just let it sit there a little bit longer. Or, you know, if you want it really, really rustic type of, you could actually just go ahead and use the wax straight from the bottle instead of watering it down. But I just wanted a little more playtime with it, and to have more control over it, and be able to remove it where I wanted to, and not be stuck with it seeping into the paint. So you just see me here, I'm dabbing it on and taking it off and making sure it's in the crevices. So this one, I used the same white wax that I used on the first one, but this one I'm not going to use the dark wax. I'm just going to leave it with the white wax, and make sure that I'm just getting into all of the little nooks and crannies of this. And I love this green color. It's a great color. It might be a little too bright, just like this, and that's why I opted to put the white wax on there, to just kind of tone that green down. You know, it's a really great color, but when you're putting it into, you know, maybe a different type of environment, like a, you know, if you don't have those kind of really loud colors or vibrant colors, and you have more of a muted, this is a way to get really great color into your space, but not have it like just that bold. And so this would actually look good with a little bit of dark wax on there, but I opted not to do that. I just put the white wax, and I'm just doing the same thing where I'm putting it on, dabbing it off, making sure that I get down into the crevices to bring out all that detail, and making sure that I have all of it covered, because the wax is going to act as kind of like a seal as well, so that way, you know, your piece is protected and stuff like that. So just remember, like, if you opt to do the whole piece before you start removing it, you may not have the ability to get a lot of that wax pulled off, only because it will already start to dry on there. And so I'm just basically wiping the tops like of things just to kind of bring out, you know, that color just on the tips of things on the, and leaving that the white wax down in the crevices of everything. So anyhow, I hope you liked this Friday craft, and I will be back next Friday.